So I left off the last video by asking the question, I think I had them these ways. Are these wines the same? Okay? So that's the question. Right? Because I've discussed that, they're both the same grape. Right? They're both Pinot Noir. Okay? They're both, this was, let's see if I can find, 2017, picked in 2017. This was picked in 2018. So, different years, right? One's made in California, one's made in France. You know, differing countries of origin, for sure. I mean, the interesting thing about Pinot Noir in particular is it has to be in a very specific kind of climate. Okay? And so we can imagine that where this was grown in California, okay, where this was grown in California, and where this was grown in France, you know, roughly the same latitude. Okay? And I mean, that is actually important to consider in the world of wine, is like the latitude of where you're at, because climate plays a big role in productive grape growing and winemaking. So, I mean, we can assume that, you know, similar latitude. Okay? I mean, clearly we want to say that they're different, right? But we also, I think, interestingly, want to say that they should be similar, right? I mean, that's where this gets kind of fun. And this is where, you know, the idea of like wine tasting, or the idea of like really diving into learning about wine, I think is really rewarding. Both, I mean, just, yes, in general, like learning about wine, learning about a subject, I think can be really rewarding and fascinating. But also the aspect here that, I mean, going back a couple of weeks, like, is there objective properties that we can learn about, that we can know about, pardon me, that we can learn about, that we can know about with regards to Pinot Noir through these two wines? Like, what objectively might be similar in these bottles, right? If we did, like, you know, chemical testing or something like that, would we find, you know, extreme similarities? And so we have to ask the question, I think, you know, how closely are these wines related? Because, I mean, I think they might be, right? I mean, they're made by very different people, very different production, probably different styles of winemaking, which is a whole other can of worms, right? But in particular, I still think there's fascinating questions to ask here of, like, how are these two bottle of wines similar? Even though they're grown and made in different styles, they're made thousands of miles away from each other. These were picked at different years, right? And I mean, maybe I'm making too much of a big deal out of this, but I don't think I am. Okay, and I'm curious what you all think here, right? And this is part of the, again, like, I think scratching the surface where wine is unique. Going back to kind of one of our introductory questions, where wine is unique because it does have this, and I mean, of course, I'm showing my own subjective biases here as it relates to wine, but there is a cerebral element, I think you could argue, with wine that maybe you don't totally find with the other two, of beer or spirits. Beer, maybe. But the idea here that if you become interested in, like, learning about wine, knowing about wine, you know, the aspect here of yeah, of kind of the cerebral aspect of, like, trying to pick apart similarities and differences. Okay? Even though all the while they are genetically very, I mean, they're the same, they're from the same rootstock, right? Like, I mean, if we again, like, trace the history of all this back, there's a high probability, and I used to know more of this history than I'm remembering right now, but if we trace all of this back, Pinot Noir grapes, there's this technique in grape growing called grafting or cloning. And essentially, it's like if I went to Burgundy, where Pinot Noir is king or queen, and I were to, like, graft, you know, off of a rootstock, bring it back, and try to grow it here, it would be, you know, again, like, from, you know, from France, but then I would be trying to make it in Idaho. I'd be trying making it in the Northwest. I mean, we saw, like, I don't know, philosophically, It's is it the same? I mean, metaphysically, is it the same? Is it different? How do we explain those similarities? How do we explain those differences? It's kind of fun, right? And it's also, I think, again, cerebrally pretty rewarding. So we'll stop there for today. And as you can see, there's one more video below of someone else kind of more cleverly describing the differences between Old World wine and New World wine. So I hope you enjoy, and again, I think that we've cracked the surface quite well. On Thursday, we'll continue discussing wine and some of the intricacies that exist within the world of wine. Cheers.